Hey there friends, it's time for Cool Prints. And today I'll be sharing a bunch of upgrades because there's nothing cooler than making great things greater. You may know by now that one of my favorite things to do with 3D printing is to design upgrades for other hobbies in my life. And I'm constantly sharing those things on this channel. But one thing I haven't augmented yet is my own body. So what if I could heighten my ordinary senses to play this OP-1 synthesizer with greater precision than ever before? See, I love this instrument, but it's quite small, and my hands be big. So my playing can sometimes get a bit sloppy. But I remember reading about human cyborgs implanting computer chips into their body to gain new senses and a closer connection to technology. And that got me thinking, if I were to magnetize the keys of my OP-1 and then implant little tiny magnets into my fingertips, I'd never miss a key again. I know, brilliant. Now, this is an expensive instrument, so I did some Googling and asked around on Reddit about whether it's safe to put magnets inside the OP-1, but surprisingly no one's tried it yet, so I guess I just gotta give it a shot. For science. So I started popping off keys. The spring mechanism looks pretty delicate in here, but there's definitely some room for tiny magnets. The black keys have less room, but there's still a little void. So I used a dab of 𝐒𝐓𝐿 and stuck in these little 1x4mm disc magnets, using another magnet on the outside to align it to the center and hold it in place while that glue dries. Now, this next black key is even smaller, so I'll have to cut away the button pressing bit here and replace that with the magnet. For that, I've got this ultrasonic knife. This knife vibrates 40,000 times per second to cut effortlessly and to make this awful noise. Ugh. But it did the trick. So I did that for every key, reinstalled them all, and miraculously, everything still works. Okay, the keys are now magnetic. Now I just need to magnetize these fingers. Oh, well, at least the magnets are small. Okie dokie. Right about here. Actually, why not just put the magnets in a glove? Duh. So I'll flip this glove inside out, and I just need to make sure that the magnets are in the correct position and facing the right way. Once again, I'll use 𝐒𝐓𝐿 to glue them into place, since this stuff works for just about anything. And once those magnets are positioned well, I'll use binder clips to hold them in place for now. Only slightly annoying since they're also magnetic, but they got the job done. I actually ended up gluing in slightly larger magnets to make my fingers as sensitive as possible. I'll flip the glove back around and we've done it. Magnet hands. Alrighty, time to become a musical prodigy. Well, it doesn't exactly translate to camera, but there's definitely a weak but noticeable force pulling my fingers to each key. It feels kinda cool, but I'm not sure it actually helps me play. If I'm being honest, I think any benefit from the haptic feedback I'm getting is pretty much canceled out by the extra bulkiness of wearing a glove. So I guess I do need implants after all. but we'll save that for another video. I do still think the magnetic keys could be useful for now though. My next idea was to make some little magnetic markers so I could plan out my melodies a bit better on the keyboard. For my markers, I got these really thin 0.5 millimeter thick magnets. I stuck them to some cardboard so I could paint them with these Posca paint markers. It did take 2 coats to get a nice solid color, but those markers worked pretty well. Now I can use these little magnets to take note of my favorite, well, notes for a particular melody. So when it's time to record, I can still noodle around without making as many mistakes. I can easily move the markers around as I finesse things, or come up with entirely different tunes. These thin magnets are pretty weak, so they do slide around sometimes. And of course, I won't be able to use them once I have permanently magnetized fingers. But they are a fun little aid for someone like me with no real knowledge about music theory, so I can keep track of which notes sound good. Now, there is another solution to big hands messing with my playing, and that's big keys. This next contraption was designed to let me play fewer notes, but with much bigger keys. I printed these out with Greengate 3D's Devin Montes Cool Gray recycled PETG, which happens to complement the OP-1 quite nicely, and this black Rep Wrapper modified PLA for the frame, which houses the OP-1 and connects to the pedals so everything is held together and in the correct position for the big keys to press the little keys. The idea behind this mod is actually to make the OP-1 playable with my feet, so I could use it more like a drum kit while playing another instrument. I definitely underestimated how tough it is to multitask like that, but I'm really happy with this idea. It's fun to play around with, and it was really a fun design problem as well. I went through a few iterations trying to figure out how to make the pedals nice and low profile, and I also added some TPU parts to minimize the risk of doing any damage to the OP-1. The buttons that actually press the keys on the OP-1 were printed with zero infill using this flexible TPU filament, so there's plenty of give, and the pedals themselves also have a stopper built in, so they can't press further down than necessary. I also went back and forth between including some spring mechanism or just relying on the springiness of the OP-1 keys. In the end, I included these simple TPU cylinders that provide just enough spring to prevent accidental key presses. The OP-1 is neat because you can program the individual keys to play specific sounds or pitches. So that's why I have these 4 big keys pressing 4 random small keys. I can still program those 4 to play the sounds I want, and it works pretty well with the feet, and it's fun to play with these fat fingers as well. OP-1 machine connected by magnetic forces that go unseen. So there are a few of my different upgrades altogether, and if the OP-1 owners out there like this pedal kit, I just might design an expanded version with more keys and a stop and play button as well, so you can cue loops and stuff. But we're still not done with the OP-1 just yet. In past videos, I shared my custom cases for the OP-1 and even these little replacement feet. But I've also designed a whole bunch of different replacement knobs to further customize the device. Some of these are based on existing OP-1 accessories, like this bender attachment, which uses a rubber band, and there's actually a built-in function specifically for the bender. This crank attachment also has a similar built-in function. Teenage Engineering, who makes the OP-1, is pretty ahead of things, and they actually share the STL files for some of their official accessories. But they are still optimized for injection molding, so I redesigned a few to better suit FDM 3D printing in particular. These all print without support material, and I put a lot of fine-tuning into making the friction fit work really well and ensuring that they all print super easily. I started with simple replacement knobs, but I also made some completely new knobs, like these funky shapes. So you can go as wild or as minimal as you like. My personal favorite is probably this scratch disc that lets you be a tiny DJ. I also really enjoy this technique of adding little accent colors using the raw 3D printing filament. You just press the filament into the hole and cut it flush. I think it looks really nice and clean, and this trick could be handy for all sorts of prints. I also made this little frame for the OLED screen. It's purely a visual element, but I think it looks nice. So those are all of the OP-1 upgrades I've come up with so far, but I've still got more hobbies that I've upgraded. I'm gonna share some new prints for filming, skateboarding, and climbing. But first, I wanna share an upgrade to my personal organization and project management on behalf of today's sponsor, Milanote. Milanote is an exceptional online tool for organizing your ideas and projects into visual boards. It's basically a whiteboard from the future that gives you endless space and lots of easy to use tools so you can brainstorm, document, and collaborate on projects in whatever way suits you best. Here you can see how I've been using Milanote to plan out my niece's upcoming birthday party, from finding inspiration to space planning and organizing activities. It's useful for so many different things and super easy to get started with over 100 built-in templates for any type of creative project. You can also share your boards with colleagues and clients to collaborate in real time, and it's totally free to get started. Just sign up using the link in the description to level up your next creative project. Alright, next up I want to share some exciting upgrades to some of the things I already started working on in my last bunch of cool prints. Near the end of last year, I showed off my new YoFace V3 electric skateboard and the Insta360 X3 camera. Well, Insta360 liked what I was doing with their action camera, so they've hooked me up with their latest version, the X3. The X3 comes with some nice upgrades, including a much larger touchscreen display, longer battery life, and a larger image sensor for a slight bump in image quality. The form factor is fairly similar, so it still has these protruding dome lenses necessary for that full 360 camera view. So naturally, I had to design some Devon-proof stands and cases for this version as well. For this one, I used my Einscan SP 3D scanner to get an accurate digital representation of the X3. And following some viewer suggestions, I covered the reflective portions of the camera with tape to get a cleaner scan. As nervous as that made me, this blue painter's tape works well to prevent any residue on the screen and lenses, and sure enough, my 3D scan came out incredibly detailed and accurate. Here is the original scan made of 700,000 triangles, which I reduced down to 10,000 triangles in Mesh Mixer before bringing it into Fusion 360. A great scan made it much easier to design my new accessories and to get that perfect friction fit on this case. I printed this one on the SV06 with a CPE top and Polyterra for the bottom, and the fit is great. Beyond the protective case, I also designed another desk side stand for worry-free charging, and this time I also made this cage that lets me at least protect the sides of the camera while filming. The cage was printed in PETG, and it's designed to flex around the camera, and then tightened with an M3 nut and screw for a secure fit. The parts I can protect are still limited because I don't want to interfere with the shot, but I'll take all the protection I can get. And in this case, it did already serve its purpose after one little tumble. The camera did still get a tiny scuff, but it's better off than it would have been otherwise. I also designed a companion case that can be used with the cage installed, just for ultimate convenience. Now, I didn't just want to print cases for this camera. I mean, those are absolutely useful, if not necessary for me, but I wanted to come up with some upgrades that also allow me to get some especially cool shots. The thing is, Insta360 already offers a ton of interesting accessories. I love this super long extended edition of their selfie stick that can mimic a high-flying drone shot. It's always fun to use this tiny world effect. And I got some otherwise tough shots. This squirrel distracted me for way too long. I also really like their third-person backpack mount, which gets this really nice over-the-shoulder view. And then there's this slightly insane bullet time thing that you swing wildly above your head while the X3 captures it at 120 frames per second. So it looks like Insta360 beat me to the punch when it comes to a lot of things, but I can still design some mounts that are hyper-specific to my needs. My first idea was to make a mount for my 𝐒𝐬𝐻 electric skateboard that lets me attach the invisible selfie stick directly to the nose or the tail of the skateboard. While I can already get awesome shots just holding the invisible selfie stick, I thought it could be handy to actually connect the stick to the board so that I could do some completely hands-free filming. And maybe it would make for some less nauseating 360 videos in VR. Since I've already designed these nose and tail guards, I figured why not come up with a fixture that uses the same bolts to mount the Insta360 selfie stick. Everything came together really nicely and it seemed pretty promising, so I brought my board out to the river again. But it turns out I really underestimated the amount of stability that comes from holding the selfie stick. Even with Insta360's high-tech stabilization, mounting the camera on the nose of my board led to some very wobbly shots. On top of that, the constant vibration was causing the selfie stick to retract on its own. Shooting with the selfie stick already lowered works a little bit better, but it's still pretty shaky. So I guess I'd have to design some extra parts to keep it rigid and extended. Maybe that could be accomplished with some carbon fiber reinforcements or something like that. Anyways, I did manage to scavenge some interesting things from the river. This nice lamp. So let me know if you want to see some exploration videos on this channel. I did try the mount again at my local park and was able to get somewhat smoother shots on the sidewalk. So it's not a total bust, but it could still use some work. Luckily, I had more success with my second specialty mount for the X3 camera, and that's this little climbing wall mount. This mount involves these 3 printed parts that screw together to combine a 1/4 20 bolt that connects to the Insta360 invisible selfie stick with a standard climbing bolt, which is normally used to fasten holds to the climbing walls at the gym. In this case, I'm using it to mount the camera directly to the wall. Basically, I carried this contraption in my mouth as I climbed up an easy route, and then I screwed it into the wall right near the top of my problem. Then I can extend the selfie stick to get some really interesting top-down views of the problem. And since this is a 360 camera, I can compose the shot afterwards to follow the action. Or my failures, and the frustration that follows. So far, I've only used this for 1 gym session, but I really like being able to see my climbs from that new point of view, and I love the fact that you can recompose the 360 video after the fact. Again, the selfie stick does bend a bit since it's sticking straight out of the wall, so it's not entirely invisible, but with careful planning, it can stay out of the shots, and either way, I'm quite happy with the results. All right, I've got one more climbing upgrade to share with you today, and maybe it's not as cool as a 360 camera mount, but it does solve a stinky situation. Climbing shoes can get a bit sweaty, so I decided to make my own shoe deodorizers using, of all things, the desiccant packs that come with most spools of filament. I came up with this cage that's designed to print easily without supports, while still having a lot of breathability for maximum airflow. After printing, I'll stuff it with those desiccant packs and fasten the lid with one of these silicone bands. The form fits really well inside my climbing shoes, and that's about all there is to it. I want to give a quick shout out to these graffiti brand silicone bands because they're the same ones I've used to add extra security to my OP-1 cases when traveling, and they can actually work quite well for my Insta360 cases as well. They last way longer than regular rubber bands, and they're clearly very versatile, so I'm a big fan. Anyways, the climbing shoe deodorizers do seem to help pull moisture from my shoes, which helps keep that stinky bacteria from showing up. So while they aren't super glamorous, I do still consider them to be some pretty cool prints. Well, that's it for this video. I've definitely still got another video or 2 worth of fun upgrades to share, so expect another episode real soon. For now, you can find links to all of these files in the video description, as well as a link to Milanote. I appreciate them for sponsoring this video, and I'm sincerely a fan, so follow that link if you want to give it a shot. And I appreciate all of you as well. Thanks for sticking around, and I hope you'll join me next time. Until then, as always, take care and stay inspired. This one's crazy.